today's exciting title, Presidential Debating, how can we turn it from spectacle back to constitutional bedrock? To introduce our distinguished speaker and set the stage for today's discussion, I am delighted to pass the microphone to my colleague, Dr. Christina Wu, in the Lawrence Herbert School of Communications. Thank you for joining us today. Thank the Cultural Center and Events Management for doing everything to make this all possible. So, Kathleen Collins and the full Cultural Center team and the Honors College team, thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Rose, I will sit. Welcome everyone, welcome. I'm also the co-moderator of the first panel today, so I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Llano, Professor of Rhetoric in the Department of Communication Studies at St. John's University. A scholar of debate, argumentation, and rhetoric, Dr. Llano authored a 2025 book titled How to Watch Presidential Debates Without Losing It, Making Rhetorical Lemonade from Political Lens, with Palgrave Macmillan. He is also co-founder and co-editor-in-chief of the open access journal, Studies in Debates and Oratory. He is one of the founding hosts of the international debate podcast, In the Bay, and regularly writes on issues concerning debates, rhetoric, and arguments in his Substack newsletter, The Sophistic Take. He has lectured and taught seminars in debating in Ukraine, Japan, Mexico, Slovenia, Serbia, Italy, and Austria. His lectures and presentations are available on his YouTube channel. Dr. Llano was also recently chosen as a Fulbright specialist in rhetoric and debates by the Fulbright organization. We're honored to have him with us today, sharing his remarks about if we can turn presidential debates back from spectacle to constitutional bedrock, and how so. He will speak for about 20 minutes before Dr. Tomeka Robinson, Senior Associate Dean of the Rabinowitz Honors College and Professor of Rhetoric and Public Advocacy, as well as myself, join him on stage for a Q&A of roughly 20 minutes. After we open it up for audience questions for 15 minutes, I know this is a lot of logistics, my very own class on theories of the media, Dr. Mina Bose's class on American presidency, the first year seminar for Honors College, which has been exploring the topic of growth this entire semester, if your professors told you to stay, along with other interested parties, will stay behind for further discussion until 11:05. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Llano on stage for an incredibly timely talk during this monumental celebration of the Constitution's 250th birthday.
Hey everybody. Good morning. This is my first time at Hofstra. Let's see if I can work the computer. Hey, thanks. I want to thank Dr. Robinson for the invitation. It's great to be here with you guys this morning, especially when we have the midterm elections coming up. Did you guys watch the presidential debates last time around? I'm sorry. Shouldn't they really be better? I go all over the world, and they're like, the question I get from all these international audiences most frequently is kind of an embarrassing one for all of us, which is, I thought America was supposed to be really good at debating. Aren't you guys to the democracy and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and all of this? Aren't you guys supposed to be better at debating? And I kind of think so too. But I'm going to go kind of backwards and explain the history of presidential debating to you in 20 minutes, and then some suggestions for you to think about, because it's really up to us what happens next. We are lucky to live in a time when presidential debating is going to be it's like the Wild West. It really is. There's not any kind of clear legal or procedural or any kind of way to go right now, and it's because of what just recently happened. Since 1988, an organization, a shadowy organization called the Commission on Presidential Debates, has run all the presidential debating. They don't cover primaries. They don't cover, when they have 17 people on the stage and like raise your hand if like the networks do that. But presidential debating is covered by this organization that's nonprofit, and they are bipartisan. They claimed in the last couple of years to be nonpartisan, but they are a bipartisan organization, meaning the Commission on Presidential Debates is primarily composed of ex-Democrat and Republican representatives and office holders. They've done it all until recently, but what happened? Well, two media organizations decided to host debates outside of the commission's purview. CNN invited Donald Trump and Joe Biden to a debate in June and hosted that debate, and they made up their own rules and everything for it. And then ABC News followed when Kamala Harris became the candidate after Biden withdrew, and Trump attended both of these. But these were network invitations. They had nothing to do with the commission. The president of the Commission on Presidential Debates had to withdraw and cancel all the presidential debate stuff they were doing at different universities. Now, Hofstra hosted a presidential debate, and that 3 of them, whoa. And I wrote a book on this, and I didn't know that. Wow. So that's a lot of money and a lot of energy and time. Imagine how that would have been here if they were like, sorry, can't do it. All that money you raised, all the preparations, all of that. What happened to that for those universities? The commission won't say. So we're in the Wild West. Now, why? You might ask, why does the commission have to host it? Why don't networks just host it? And the reason why is because of the Federal Telecommunications Act, Section 315. Now, this is a lot of text. This is like, I teach public speaking. This is a big public speaking violation, but to put all this text on a slide. But I wanted to show it to you in full because it's those 4 numbered things that are most important to look at. If you are a registered presidential candidate and you go to a TV station and they give you time at some amount of money or they invite you to speak for free, they have to offer that exact same amount of time at that same rate to every other registered candidate. So you can see how that would make a network very nervous to have any candidate on at all, because if they give them 30 minutes for free, they have to give every candidate 30 minutes for free, whoever's federally registered, whether it's Vermin Supreme or the Baby Squirrel Party or the Jugglers Anonymous Party or whoever, and then they would waste all of this network time, which is worth a lot of money to them, through advertising. But Congress did make these 4 exemptions as the Telecommunications Act advanced. 1, a bona fide newscast. You're covering news of a candidate in trouble. For example, just to pull one out of a hat, if they're accused of sexual assault or sexual harassment. And more relevant to California than us now, for once. A bona fide news interview. They're interviewing a candidate on their positions on something. They've invited them on a news show as an interview. A bona fide news documentary. They're doing a documentary on their life of some kind. Or on-the-spot coverage of bona fide news events. And that would be number 4 is the most important one for this. So before the commission, the League of Women Voters hosted this because what they determined was we can work around federal law here. If someone hosts a debate and they invite candidates, then it's a bona fide news event and we don't have to do equal time. The network doesn't have to provide that free and equal time. So the history of presidential debates here, just to kind of cut to the chase, is outside of the law, an exemption to the law, a trick of the law, and really not constitutional at all. It's people tricking and finding loopholes in the law to host these things, which I think is quite sad. The League of Women Voters, they were always very nervous about doing this because they thought they were violating the law. They thought they'd be sued. They invited the Republican and Democrat, and then those parties would work together to create the rules, and the League of Women Voters would say, well, hang on, I don't know. I don't know about this. We might get in trouble. aren't we breaking federal law here? And the parties are like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Everything's cool. The League of Women Voters then decided to get a little bit, this is kind of a blurry photo, but it's kind of old. They got a little bit, they tried to exert some of their power over the parties. In the 1980 presidential race, John Anderson, who's a congressperson from Ohio, ran as a libertarian Republican independently. Ronald Reagan got the Republican nomination. Anderson didn't get it, but he stayed in the race. The League of Women Voters thought Anderson was an interesting candidate and invited him to the debate. With Reagan and Anderson at the debate, Jimmy Carter declined to attend, and this is how they staged it. See that big gap in the middle? That's all everyone was thinking about. This was thought by political strategists and the parties to really have hurt President Carter's reelection chances in 1980, because both candidates were like, I'll answer the question, that's great, but the man who really should be answering these questions chose not to come. This was the impetus for the formation of the Commission on Presidential Debates. Presidential debates are the work of these two men. On your left is Adlai Stevenson, former governor of Illinois, who had the distinguished joy in American politics of running against Dwight Eisenhower twice. It's like, well, I reduced the price of taxes. I beat the Nazis. Like, who do you think won those elections, right? So poor Adlai Stevenson, he was frustrated. But what he was really frustrated about was presidential primaries. He thought they were beneath the work of someone running for president. Stevenson said, why do I have to drink a glass of cranberry juice in front of the press in Wisconsin and say, delicious. And then I have to go to Florida next week and do the same thing with orange juice. This seems trivial. A president shouldn't have to do this stuff. Primaries are stupid. And he wanted to get rid of presidential primaries. He was like, we're a nation. We should be doing national issues at the presidential level. He's actually very Whiggish. If you think about the Whig Party, if you know anything about the history of that, he's very Whiggish. He's like, the nation is the thing. That's what the president should be talking about. He wrote 2 long-form opinion pieces in all the major newspapers in the U.S. for the 1960 election, saying we have this new technology, TV. We should be using TV to have political discussions about national issues for national elections and not have primaries. And this was the start of all of that. A man who worked for him here on the right, Newton Minow, who was John F. Kennedy's FCC commissioner. He's very, very famous for a quote he made about television. He called it a vast, empty teenage wasteland, which you might know the song from The Who, or television made endless fun of him. You might know the show Gilligan's Island. They named the wrecked boat SS Minnow in honor of Newton Minow. That's how they felt about him. He was very anti-television. He thought it was kind of garbage. The idiot box, all that stuff. But Newton Minow took these ideas of Stevenson, his former boss, to Congress. They had a special hearing, and in 1960, Congress put a 1-year exemption on equal time. And that's how we had the Kennedy-Nixon debates. Adlai Stevenson didn't even own a television. His staffers, he was a big baseball fan, and his staffers would have to hold the phone up to the speaker on the TV so he could hear what was going on at home if he wanted to catch up on the score. It was kind of interesting that he kind of thought, you know how like older people kind of think the internet is the magical solution to democracy? Think of Stevenson that way with television. Those are the magical solution to democracy, right? So the Kennedy-Nixon debates are really worth studying on their own. They had 4 of them, and they were a technological and broadcast miracle, the things they were able to do, including a simulcast in 1960 where Nixon was in Los Angeles and Kennedy was in New York, and they managed to do the questions evenly with no delay. That's even hard to do on Zoom now. And they managed to do that in 1960. I think it's pretty impressive. But this was put together by all 3 networks and put together themselves as an exemption to federal law. And it was watched by tons and tons and tons of people. But then there wasn't another debate until 1976. Why? Congress didn't act on the Telecommunications Act and didn't change the law on equal time. So every time it has to be a violation of the law, either through special congressional act or a loophole. So the loophole was what they did in 76 with the League of Women Voters. Here's Carter and Gerald Ford in the 1976 debates, which had a lot of technical problems. It's funny, you should watch it on YouTube. They have a 17-minute pause where the microphones don't work and they just stand there. Because they're not sure what to do. It's like TV is still kind of new to them. So they're not really sure what to do, and they kind of stand there. But where does the model of American debate come from, might be the question. Why do we have this like 50 random questions on anything, 2 minutes, you get a minute rebuttal maybe if the journalist is feeling nice or likes you. Where does this model come from? because we've had such better models in the past. So let me now take it to my opinion, the opinion section of this, which is what should we do next? And this is really kind of up to you guys. What should we do next about all of this stuff? We could go back to better models. The Lincoln-Douglas debates. Are you familiar with the Lincoln-Douglas debates? These were not for president. Lots of people write the presidential debates of Lincoln, these were for Senate, which is very, very strange to think about because Senate wasn't even directly elected at this time. That amendment was not in the Constitution. Senators were chosen by the state referendum, the governor, however the state wanted to do it. So these debates were meant really to help the legislature see that Stephen Douglas, who was incredibly powerful, that's him on the right in case you don't know. It's kind of an obvious thing. But Stephen Douglas everyone thought he was going to be president. He was an extremely powerful Democrat, but he was very, very unpopular with President Buchanan because he had ended what's called the Missouri Compromise. He did that by accident by pursuing something called popular sovereignty, which is when a territory organizes as a state, they should have a referendum to decide if slavery is legal there or not. And this created chaos, bleeding Kansas, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. What happened was Kansas sent in 2 petitions for statehood. One of them slave, one of them free, and Congress was like, whoa, this is your fault, Stephen. He's like, oh no, we'll go with the correct voting. But Buchanan was like, this gives us an opportunity to clean house in the next election. Let's support the Lecompton Constitution, the pro-slave Constitution. And Douglas wouldn't do that in the Senate, so Buchanan ran another Democrat against him. This is actually a 3-party race, 3-candidate race. People don't know that. That's why Douglas agreed to debate a former Whig congressman who was a candidate from a brand new one-issue party, the Republican Party. And most people in the country thought the Republican Party was a one-issue party in slavery. And that was scary to them. They worked this out themselves through a series of letters. How long should we speak? And where should it be? And they just wrote each other directly. And then they decided on a format that I don't think any American today could handle, which is I'll start with a 30-minute question. You'll have 3 hours to respond, and then I'll have a 1.5-hour rebuttal. And everyone was like, fine. These were like carnival kind of atmospheres. They sold popcorn, cotton candy. People came out picnicking, spent the day there. They would have a bonfire at night with a band. And most importantly, the Stephen Douglas stands followed him around to every debate with a 15-pound cannon, which they fired every time they thought Douglas made a good point. A very different era. A very different era. These are also a great moment for the media. This is the era where the press is becoming much faster. They're not really animal-driven anymore, steam-driven. So what you'd have is stenographers write down everything that happened in the debate, and then they'd have a horse waiting for them, and they'd whip that horse crazy to catch the train to Chicago, like literally like from a movie. Here's the guy taking the note. I mean, it's kind of like cool for scholars like me. The guy with the notes on the presidential debate is like jumping from the horse onto the train, like a Wild West movie, and then copying the stenography on the train to Chicago so it could be telegraphed to New York overnight. So these are the first nationally covered political debates of this. Every newspaper in the country. It only took about 3 days for the transcript to get to New Orleans. That's a miracle in those 3 days. Wow, I can see the news from 3 days ago. I live at the best time in history. So why can't we get back to this? Why can't the candidates just do this themselves? This is kind of the commission debate model. Minow wanted this. Minow's argument, if he were here today, he passed away 2 years ago, but if he were here today, he'd say, you can't have debates without candidates. We should do everything the candidates want, or we won't have debates at all. And then you don't have voter education, to which I reply, what is your definition of voter education? Should we score or decide these debates at all? The media has decided to do it in a simple binary. It's either a fact or it's not. This doesn't really help us decide on anything. It might educate us a bit on whether or not they're lying or what, but the president is more than just a fact machine. And the governor is more than just a fact machine, and a senator is more than just a fact machine. So shouldn't we be doing a bit more with this? Shouldn't there be some more connection, something more rhetorical than this? The problem with this is often when you read these fact checks, they kind of make you more confused than the debate did itself. You're not really sure because a fact comes from the Latin factum, which is a verb to make. It's also the root of the word manufacture. So these aren't things that fall out of the sky. We made these things. They're not separate from humanity. The trick is to say, well, facts stand apart from our emotions and our feelings, but these are things we've constructed through society, through intellectual work, or what have you. They're just things that are much more rarely tested than opinions. So this doesn't really help us There might be other signs we could look for that this is kind of obscuring. But should we maybe have experts give a decision? I used to do that for Newsday. I was on a panel for Newsday for many years where I was like the academic, but it would be me, a former Republican county commissioner, former Democrat county commissioner, like an undecided housewife voter or a plumber Joe or whatever, and then a Hofstra student. And then we all had our columns and our vote in the old Newsday papers. That's kind of nice. I think that's a little bit better, but still, that's something for you to think about. Should there be an actual scorer or a decision or an expert of some kind? I kind of set out my own in my book, which I said that you can look at a presidential debate and you can look and try to figure out how to score it on these 4 concepts. Framework. Does the candidate describe the world that you know, or are they living in la la land? Do you recognize the world they're describing or not? Principle. What are their ultimate positions? What do they stand for above anything else? Do they articulate those clearly? Are those principles you think are good? Do you share them? Do you think America should share them? Are they American? What do you think? Vision. What are their plans as president? How are they going to do these plans? What are they going to do for us? Do you agree with those plans? Do you think those are good? Another place to decide. And finally, action. What have they done in the past that makes them well suited for this incredibly difficult job? So as you, what I say in my book is, as you listen to presidential debates, you keep these 4 scoring principles in action, and then you can talk to other people about it. You can say, well, I really like the ideas, but I just don't think this person lives in reality. Or I just don't think those principles are the ones to stand for. And then you can see why those principles are bad, because look at how much of a corporate tax break they want to give. Or you can say, I don't think their time as Pokemon TCG champion is really relevant to being president or whatever, right? So a lot of these things, and then they could also work negative too, like action usually a lot. Like we look at the Solwell stuff in California, we could say these actions disqualify him from office. And that would be kind of the action thing. Or even accusations are probably enough, but it's very contextually dependent. So that's what I wrote about in the book. But there's a lot more to say. What do you guys think about a constitutional requirement to debate? This has come up a few times in Congress. It's been debated on the floor of the Congress, most recently in the 1980s, but it was connected to federal matching campaign funding, which is a big deal. A lot of time now, since we've had Citizens United, it's not such a big deal anymore, I don't think, but the idea was to say you cannot get any kind of matching, federal matching funds for your presidential campaign, which is like millions and millions and millions of dollars, unless you participate in a debate, because people were worried they wouldn't participate. That hasn't happened in a long time. Most of the time, I think the Republican Party is the one who kind of started the whole, we're not going to debate the commission's biased, but that was Trump. That was actually that whole incident with Trump and Biden in, I think in the 2016, where Steve Scully tweeted to a former moderator, how do I handle Trump? And then, what's his name, Scaramucci, Scaramucci, that guy, the 5-day communications director, tweeted back, here's how you do it. And he was like, thanks. And Trump was like, look, that's bias. This guy can't moderate a debate. Steve Scully's biased, to which Brian Lamb said, I worked with this guy for 30 years at C-SPAN, and I have no idea what party he supports. He's that professional, but they still, the commission couldn't act. They just canceled the debate. They couldn't find another moderator or whatever. We all lost from that one, because the commission isn't there to regulate or even frame a debate. They're just there to make the candidates happy, and it shows. It really showed in that. So I think that they're kind of on their way out. Do you think that you should debate as a kind of an eligibility test to stand in the primary? We have these primary debates, but maybe if someone doesn't attend those, like Donald Trump, who famously didn't attend any of them, and Nikki Haley attended all of them, and then she lost very, very hard in the primary, maybe it should be a party test. Like if your candidate in your party, your preferred party, won't stand up and debate other primary candidates, maybe there's a problem with them. What do they have to hide? But there was a time in this country when it was wrong to declare that you wanted to be president. You would be thought you were insane. What you had to do was say, no, not me. I could never be president. No. And everyone's like, yes, you must. He's like, no, I cannot. I just want to go to my cabin and grow corn or whatever. I just don't want to. No, not me. And then they would literally be chanting and bringing them out. And they're like, I don't want to do it, but my country needs me. They won't leave me alone. I have to do it. And this is the way it was done. And now it's 3 years out, they're like, I want to be president. I even have students say that now. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. It's really gone a whole different way. a whole different way. But that led to a practice of debate called surrogate debating, which Abraham Lincoln did quite a bit when he was a young man, which is you'd go out and have debates with other surrogate debaters for the other candidate, because it would be improper for someone to debate and argue if they were a presidential candidate. You go out and be like, this is why I like this person, this is why I like this, and that might be a way to come back to instead of this, because you had Bernie Sanders debate Ted Cruz on CNN as a surrogate debate about national health care policy. And then you had in the last election, I don't know if any of you watched it, it was pretty bad, but you had Ron DeSantis debate Gavin Newsom on CNN. That was pretty bad. But that's what a surrogate debate is like. They're able to go a lot more crazy and say a lot more crazy things and be a lot more animated because they're not losing votes. They're kind of in a safe position. Usually it's someone who's in an off-year election, right? Like Newsom and DeSantis were at that time. But an amendment would be a lot of work, as the process is up here. It would be a lot of work to do, but something to think about. Maybe that would improve the debates, because Congress would have to have hearings about what would count in the debates. We could abandon the commission format. This is probably the biggest one, is that CNN and ABC follow the commission format, which is the least presidential thing in the world. You don't wake up as president and say, today you're going to have 60 hidden questions, no notes, no advisors. You have to answer them all in 2 minutes. Let's go. No, that's not. The president goes into a room with 50 advisors and they spend hours and hours looking at data. How is the presidential debate even a test of being president? It's not. It's a game show. The commission format is a game show. It's a joke. The president is never going to have to stand up there with no notes and talk about economics and China and Palestine and global warming. Like, it's just random. It's just so, it's like we want to, it's what John McCain famously called gotcha journalism. And I think we should abandon it. This is a photo from Oxford Union, one of the oldest and best debating societies in the world. The Oxford format's there. It's used. People pick it up. Intelligence Squared in New York. The Doha debates in Qatar. I'm trying to think of some other, there's a ton of these podcasts that use the Oxford format. Why don't we just go back to the Oxford format? Or some people have suggested to me the Jubilee format with the red flags and all. Oh God, no thank you. I think that's a terrible format debate too, but we can talk about that. Newton Minow said that they should maybe do brain trust debates in a perfect world. A brain trust debate is more presidential, where you would have experts on China debate Chinese foreign policy, and the presidential candidates would watch this debate, and we'd watch them watch the debate, take notes, all that. And then after a preset period of time, the candidates would take the floor and say who they thought won the debate and which policies they agreed with. I think that would give us a lot more information about how these candidates think as president, wouldn't it? I think it's a great idea, but this is Minow. He said, the parties would never agree to it, so I never proposed it. See, he's like the party's first guy. But I think this would be a great thing to think about if we were going to give a constitutional amendment or some requirement for funding matching. My idea is alternative panelists, like instead of journalists asking the questions, let's have a kindergarten teacher, a choir director, a poet, a shipbuilder. Let's have some like actual American people, not like Jake Tapper, who doesn't really seem real to me. Let's not have this kind of a person. Let's have real people ask the questions. A panel of artists would be amazing. It's like, I'm a professional dancer in New York and I do ballet and I want to ask you this, and like, that'd be great. Like people who do other things. So I call that the alternative panelist format, and that's my idea. But it really is in the end up to us. The foundation is, what is debate's role in democratic governance? Here's some things to think about. It should be based on reason and evidence. You guys write papers, right? I hope. Or maybe Claude writes your paper. Yeah, no, don't raise your hand. Fifth Amendment's still, I haven't checked CNN, but we still have the Fifth Amendment as of now. That one probably won't go away in this administration. The thing is, you have to give citations, footnotes. Presidents don't have to do that. Why? Why? Don't you think it's more important than your 5-paragraph essay for your history class or whatever? Probably, right? One topic for the whole hour, one well-worded topic. The United States should increase trade relations with China. That's a debate motion. And then they should debate that. And one should say, here's my proposal, and then they have a chance to argue against it. And the other one says, here's my proposal. They have a chance to argue against it. Not a bunch of questions. Good debate is one reasonable topic. And then there's two sides. There's an opposition and a proposition. You have to have that in debate to have good debate. Turn taking. Nobody cuts each other off. No unequal time. You get 5 or 6 uninterrupted minutes to speak. I think that would be great. These are all the rules of any good debate society on the planet. Establishing a case. It's about the audience. Not about your opponent, not about the party, not about the people. It's about that. So these are the things I think should be in it. So there's much more to talk about. I'll end there with a brief advertisement. But think about it. It's really up to us, and we can push Congress to do whatever we want. Congress really should act on this. It's been a long time since Congress has even had hearings on presidential debates. And I think it's about time. But the last hearings were 1960. And then since then, so how do we get it back to a constitutional bedrock? We have to push Congress to act. I think that's really it. And I don't know if they will or not, but this will never be a constitutional bedrock if it's based on loopholes and skirting the law.
Well, first of all, thank you for joining us this morning and for your lovely talk and the ideas that were there. So our students have been really studying growth and the idea of growth this entire semester, our first year honors college students. So my first question for you is, for democracy to grow, public discourse has to improve, right? So what role can students and young voters play in pushing candidates and even media platforms towards more substantive, policy-focused debates?
No, that's a very good question. I like that one. So what can you guys do to push these things forward? I think one of the things is something that I used to make fun of my grandparents about quite a bit, which they would get frustrated, and they're like, I'm going to write my congressman. But this is something I do quite a bit, and I get a variety of responses. But I think even if you call congressional offices, they have to take note of what you're calling about, and that gets measured by an intern or someone, and then that gets sent on to the candidate. But I do think that we have an incredibly powerful tool for this. Where is it? Oh yeah, here's mine. I think you have something similar. And this is like having a kind of a photo video studio in your pocket. And I think social media is kind of an entertainment device, but I think it could be used to do a lot more public policy debating among young people. That's not as attractive as what happens on there now. But I do think that would be a place to do it. And there have been some companies who've tried to do that. And there's some people who are trying to work on making tools for the phone that improve civic debate and stuff. But I think a college campus is a place where people should be openly expressing their opinions about politics with people their own age. Because one day, I'm not going to be here. All of us aren't going to be here. You'll be running things. And you don't want it to look the same as it does now, I would imagine. So talking to other people on the campus and creating an informal debate club, or even a formal debate club, is a great way to do it too. Something open, maybe not like what you would think of when you think of debate club, like going to tournament competitions, things like that, but something campus oriented and a place for people to freely express their views. Debates being unfortunately used as a marketing tool in this respect because it's being run by big money companies, Turning Point, Jubilee, which is a big media company. They have an axe to grind, but you could have an axe-free one. I think it'd be pretty easy to do.
This is a follow-up of that question, and I will do quite a few rounds of self-serving plug for my theories class, in that we've been spending the whole semester visiting all of these classic theories of the media, of communication processes, and it appears that agenda setting has had some sticking power among my students. And we've observed that as far as debates go, certain items, issues, agenda items like the climate issues do not tend to make the agenda on debate stages. So you just answered Dr. Robinson's question. So how can people sitting in the room, the younger generations, also worried about their jobs and postgraduate plans, push their own agendas aside from contacting the Congress and conducting their own conversations on campus onto the debate stage?
Yeah, onto the debate stage is tough. Well, this is the best time to ask that because it's the Wild West. I don't know what the midterm debates are going to look like. I imagine that that a lot of candidates, if they're a very strong candidate, are maybe going to decline having debates, which hasn't happened in a long time. The feeling that you have to debate is pretty strong among candidates, but that might happen in the midterms. We'll have to see. It'll be a good bellwether for the next presidential. But you could also have people decline to do it. LBJ always declined to debate. He's like, I got nothing to prove, I'm the president. Very LBJ kind of response. Richard Nixon had a very good Richard Nixon response, which is, I might be afraid I would give away state secrets because I'd get so angry in the debate. I might be like, you lose because of this, and I'd give away some national secret or something, and that was his reason not to do it. But I also think he was traumatized by the 1960 debates with Kennedy. Who wouldn't be? I mean, Kennedy, I wouldn't want to debate Kennedy, would you? But how do we set that agenda? I mean, one of the things that might be interesting is I think that we all have an ethical responsibility in a democracy to share our opinion, not share facts, which is what we're told to do. And we kind of have this default mode of, well, if I don't know the facts, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to be wrong. And being wrong is like the worst thing you could be in our culture, in global culture. But I think it's more worse to keep your opinion from other people. And it's okay to be wrong. We should try to celebrate that and be like, thank you for showing me that my opinion was unfounded. But since we only have facts to lean on, when someone disagrees with us, we're like, this person must not understand basic facts. And so there's a problem with them. They're a Nazi. They're woke. A snowflake. They're blue-pilled or whatever. You know, the Reddit list goes on. But I think that is the problem. We have to go back to kind of an ethical idea of being wrong is okay and actually a celebrated thing. But for the debates, I think that getting away from the commission format is so important. I don't really know how to do that. I think it would be good for an organization, like a climate change organization, to host their own debate. I do not think they would get sued now. CNN did not get sued. ABC did not get sued. Sierra Club, WWF, I don't know. Would they get sued? I don't know. But I think that they should at least try, because I don't think the climate, since the Supreme Court decision since Reagan, fair time has been caught up with the fairness doctrine. And both of those things are thought of as the same thing. The fairness doctrine was pretty much defeated in court as a free speech issue. But fair time kind of was dragged along with that. Equal time was dragged along with that. I think now would be the time to do it. So I don't know if that really answers the question. That's a tough one. Yeah. But if you're a member of an organization like ACLU or Sierra Club or something like that, encourage them to have a presidential debate or even a down ballot debate, senatorial debate. Who else is going to do it? These debate organizations are going to host it, and they don't know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to go back to your comment a little bit earlier about what they should be doing. So what skills should college students be developing to move beyond reacting to these, kind of gotcha moments that you talked about? And instead, how should they be learning to engage more critically with what few policies are being discussed, but when there are policy ideas that are being put forth?
Yeah, I think one of the best things you could learn how to do is speak in front of a crowd. It's always a nervous kind of thing, I think, for most people. I've never had a problem with it. I actually kind of enjoy it, but I'm kind of lucky. I think most people would rather die than be sitting up here. I think that's a very important skill. And also, this is a very important skill from another historical example, which is from what apparently, according to the meme, most men think about twice a day, the Roman Empire. The idea that the Romans had incredible rhetorical education. Mm-hmm. Instead of papers and writing and paper and pen being the focus, or your laptop or your iPad being the focus, it was all oral. Every exam was a speech. Every quiz was a speech. Nothing was written. So everyone was an incredibly well-organized, perfect speaker. So when there were decisions that had a lot of great information in them, what did the Romans lean on or reach for to make a difference? And it was eloquence. Eloquence is the big tiebreaker. I think if you're an eloquent person, and what does eloquence mean? Does it mean sounding really pretty? No, because it's contextual. You have to speak in a way the audience will find engaging. So people who study other people, what motivates them, what they identify with, and are able to alter their words and alter what they want to say for that audience are going to be incredibly successful going forward in this way. I think that's an important one. And I also think reading a lot, there's no substitute for that. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to read a book like an LP. You don't have to put the needle down and listen to the whole thing. You can just go read the most interesting chapter and then go to the notes and go read that next. You can just kind of jump around. Everything is a hypertext, I guess would be what I would say. So you can click on the link in a physical book or whatever. But 45-second AI narrated videos aren't going to do it for knowing the world, I'm afraid. even though those are oral. So, and AI is, even if you might use AI for reasons other than your civic engagement, it's going to bleed into that, and then you're not going to sound believable. Already people are turning against people who sound AI when they speak and when they write, even though they don't use it. There's a lot of famous cases for that. So I would say work on your speaking.
This is a plug for those public speaking rhetoric classes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of instructors should move towards oral exams, and oral exams in a place like this. You know, like in the 19th century, graduation exercises at the Ivy Leagues where the seniors had to have a debate that they put together themselves on a topic, but that debate was in Latin, which tells you more about the audience for graduation exercises than the students even. Everybody could understand it.
And even in my theories class, our students actually have to be put through a round of debate. But I keep assuring them it's not like the debates that you tend to teach. This is a two-part question since we've been focusing on America so far. And the first one is more technical. Do you think that the muted microphones are the key to fixing the interruptions and almost this embarrassing unruliness during the debate? And the second part is that America is now so defined by this violent, aggressive style of debate, right? So much so that we keep talking about European countries and even Canada, where the election cycle is like a few weeks. And yesterday I found out that this presidential candidate just like rode off on his bike after the debate,
I saw
election
that
results. What lessons do we have to learn from the peer democracies?
Oh, that's very good. I've been asked a similar one to that before because I think there's a lot of concern that foreign media companies are very excited about the commission format and they're employing that in their national debates. So you see that in the UK, Ireland did that. Actually, the last round of the Irish presidency, they didn't do an American-style debate. So that was refreshing. It was more like a dialogue, maybe a conversation. But it had the same kind of edge to it that you would want in a debate like that. The French presidential debates are pretty good. They have a very clear timer, and there's certain things you're not allowed to do. It's very restrictive. And the candidates directly address each other. Now this is a problem here. We don't want the candidates directly addressing each other. So we're like, oh, let's turn off the microphone. That's all the commission could come up with. And then Jake Tapper was like, what a brilliant idea, which says a lot about Jake Tapper. And that he thought this was just genius. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised. But he did that in their debate. They turned it off. But I don't know if that's really a solution. I think the solution is respect for, I don't have to interrupt you to prove that you're wrong. I can just let you talk and be like, and then I could just very powerfully say, but what about this? Like a quarter of the time used. These are the rhetorical skills of argumentation and debate that are kind of lost. But as far as foreign media goes, maybe media blackouts might be a good thing for elections in general. I like that idea. I like, the amount of money people spend on campaigns is crazy. But in terms of debate, I think getting back to those principles of good debate and people wanting to see to lose an argument shouldn't cost you the election. That might actually be a really good reason to vote for you. If you said, wow, I don't really know, I might be wrong about that, and have some humility. Instead of being like, I will never. It's like, you're already in trouble. In the Lincoln-Douglas debates, Senator Douglas asked Lincoln a 30-minute question. And at the end of it, Lincoln stood up and he said, I would love to answer this question, but it really hinges on a question about law that I'm not too familiar with. So what I'd like to do is pause the debate, and I'm going to go to the library, and I'm going to research this. And I recommend we reconvene in 1 hour for the rest of the debate. And everyone agreed to that. That's nice, right? That would never happen. I mean, people would be like, what a loser, he doesn't know. And I'm like, I think anyone who claims that they know everything in their head should be legally barred from running for public office, right? They're a crazy person. So I don't know if this is just, the foreign media tends to follow the American media because unfortunately it's capitalistic driven. The BBC, other kinds of state media, the CBC had some good debates, but they're the party leader debates. And I wonder in a parliamentary system, you don't really need a chief executive model debate. Because in parliamentary systems, you have government by cabinet. So the prime minister is not a chief executive. That was news to Tony Blair, but they're not a chief executive. So they all work together. So maybe some kind of a panel exercise or something would be good. But I don't think commission-style debates are good even for us, even with our Constitution. They're not good for us. They tend to reinforce bad feelings. I'll end there.
Yeah, okay. We have a few minutes before some of our classes have to leave, so I do want to open it up to any of our, especially our students who have to go to their sections or have to leave. Any questions from the audience? There is a mic down here, but also Dean Burngout Kozel, can you kind of help? Just raise your hand. Oh, got one already.
Thank you so much. I found this very, very interesting. As a journalism student, I was wondering, what do you think is the best way going forward for future journalists and future reporters and even citizen journalists to try and remain unbiased in these types of situations where we are seeing personal attacks and straw mans during presidential debates?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. It does, personal attacks and straw man, ad hominems and straw mans, but then there's also begged questions. Should journalists be objective? That's a big one to think about because you have foreign press. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they wear it on their sleeve, the left-wing paper, the right-wing paper. That might be interesting. I think one of the best thing I would like to see journalists do in form of debate is to not do, and I forget the media term for this, but maybe you know it, but when a journalist interviews another journalist about something, like, what is that? It's like those little Ukrainian nesting dolls, but it just goes on forever. Like, what does a journalist have? They're like, what are the Israelis thinking tonight, Tom? And it's like, Tom is the senior correspondent. It's like, well, they're all in a private room doing. I was like, how do you know? Give me a source, Mm-hmm. I think it would be better if journalists covered the debate. That's actually the spirit of the law from the early Telecommunications Act, is they were scared of the media companies getting too involved in politics because of how we do our broadcast licenses. We sell them off at auction. And so instead of, and it's kind of a public thing, and so we were kind of scared of that. I would say interview more debate experts. Mm-hmm. The Commission on Presidential Debates, no one there has any kind of education degree. No one there has any kind of communication degree. They don't care about this kind of stuff. So I would like journalists to kind of maybe they could be that check and say, we have this debate expert, what do you think? What did they do poorly? Who won this argument? Instead of all talking about whether they thought it was a good debate or not, because they all cover politics. Mm-hmm. So I guess getting away, it's not even really journalism if it's like a celebrity newsreader, they're not really journalists in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So maybe some more of the hard-hitting journalists and more independent journalism involved in the debates would be great. How to make that happen, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. You're welcome, yeah.
Thank you so much for an amazing talk. So for your point of, for example, President Lincoln being able to admit that he was wrong and go to a library and research, and that being viewed as acceptable, well, that would never be acceptable today. Do you think that factors like horse race journalism, increased political polarization, and etc., what specific series of events, if there is any, or what trend of events do you think is the biggest underlying cause of this that's propagating these factors?
Yeah, the biggest underlying cause of polarization? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest, we don't have any tools for dealing with polarization. Polarization makes a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Fox News, CNN, NBC, CBS, all those, they're like, I never watch the nightly news, but my partner it's part of her ritual of winding down as a glass of wine and David Muir. And I'm like, how is this a wind down? I haven't watched it in years, but it's always like, tonight, 18 tornadoes rip through the Midwest. You'll see it live. Bombs are going off all over the place. And in America Strong, a cat teaches a geriatric woman how to love again. It's like the weirdest thing. The national news is so weird. The polarization, I think, comes from thinking of information as a product and not as something that we all share and create together. Like in terms of rhetoric, there's nothing that is absolutely factual or true unless you put an audience there. Then you can talk about what's true and factual. But without that intermediary of the audience, you're really just kind of in this solipsistic mode. And that's very dangerous because we tend to, like you would learn in social science, a sample set of one proves everything and nothing. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's happening in our country with polarization. And the solution for polarization, according to these organizations like Intergroup Dialogue and Braver Angels, these ridiculous organizations that I can't stand, they say the result, we should just have no more debate. We should hug each other. And if somebody really does think every immigrant should be tossed into the ocean, the problem is with you. You need to understand where they're coming from. The problem's you, not them. You need to understand where they're coming from and smile more. And so this makes polarization even worse because the tools are actually more debate, more questions. What are your reasons? What is your evidence? Talk about Abraham Lincoln again. Last night, 2 nights ago, I was down by Cooper Union hosting a debate between St. John's and the Irish national champions from Ireland. And since I was at Cooper Union, I'm like, maybe Lincoln has a solution for us because he gave his amazing interpretation of the Constitution as anti-slavery at Cooper Union. One of the most amazing speeches in American history is Lincoln's Cooper Union address. Every American should read that because not only is it a beautiful argument for the Constitution, it's a beautiful way to deal with your opponents in a debate. And he just kept repeating the same thing. Explain your reasons to me. I want to understand. Show me your evidence if you have it. And I think those are the two principles that help with polarization. Well, I want to know. I do want to support Donald Trump. I do want to support Joe Biden. Show me your evidence. Show me your reasoning. How do you think? What are your life experiences that brought you here? And more of that, I think, would help tremendously. But that's an education thing, but that's also a citizen thing. We should do that with the people in our lives. Mm-hmm. Friends, coworkers, family, be like, oh, I'd love to know more about that, instead of being like, oh my God, you're woke. Go away, which is what we do now.
Mm-hmm. All right. I do want to pause for a second. So the students who do need to leave, we are going to pause. I see that question. So if you are if you're seeing any instructors have instructed you that you are going to your first section, please get up now and head out, and then we'll get to our next question. All right, if you're staying, go ahead and please settle back in. All right, so do you have the mic?
Yes,
right,
ma'am.
Perfect.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you, all of you guys, for coming out and discussing with us and holding this dialogue with us. I'm Rehan. I'm a political science student. And my question for you, sir, you mentioned that debates should primarily be just about one topic. I wanted to ask your reasoning on that, because I feel like in society now, we see how broad social issues and political issues there are, either it be international or domestic. And then you have so many other topics between those and inside of those, and it goes from so many different things that those people who are running for office, especially presidential candidates, they don't want to go to so many debates. They want one or two maybe during the election, and that's it. So how are we supposed to maintain one debate topic when there's so many different issues we need to discuss?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say for each debate, there should just be one topic. So not just one for the whole. I mean, actually, you could say, and I used to say this, every presidential debate had the same topic, which is, I should be president. And that was the topic, and then each side was like, me, and it's like the little seagulls from Finding Nemo. Mine. I think that you're right. There's a lot of different topics swirling around, and there's no way to get any kind of depth or any kind of serious consideration of any of them, because they all kind of become these equivocal fallacies. I'll take a great example. The biggest one, there's a special election in New Jersey today for Micah Sherrill's seat. What are they talking about? Affordability. The New York City mayor's race, what became the issue there? Affordability. What is affordability? What does that even mean? It would be great to have a debate where you say the most important issue to Long Island is affordability, and have candidates debate that, or to New York, the governor's race. That would be great to have that debate, because in that, candidates could then show how they reason and do exactly what you want. They could say, well, the root of affordability is really this. It's the fact that there's not affordable daycare, or affordability is really because we have landlords who don't live here who buy up all the property and then just use it as a tax shelter, or like a Mamdani kind of argument. You could, and then they're able to show you how they can make it back to that larger claim and really give the details and explanation of what they mean by that, instead of it just being kind of a bumper sticker or an equivocation. Like, candidates are terrible. It's like, we have to attack Iran because they're against our freedom. And everyone's like, yeah, freedom's good. But then if you start thinking about it, you're like, what is freedom? Is freedom like, sitting on the LIE 40 minutes to go to the job that doesn't pay me enough to pay my car note or fill up my tank? Like, what is freedom? What is this? How ridiculous. And then you start to do it yourself, but there's no outlet for that. I think it would give us a chance to see how candidates think, how they reason, and how they read evidence much better. We do get those moments in the current presidential debates. They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Where did you see that? I saw it on television. Okay, so that shows you Trump's critical thinking prowess, right? He believes that if he saw it on TV. Maybe that's not good for president. But I don't know if I really addressed your question. I think that we won't have a lot of debates, but we can also do that ourselves, surrogate debating. If you're a big fan of a candidate, then you can go out and take on all challengers in your life and kind of make it your own personal thing. But I think that's the Democratic ethic, is to always ask questions and spend time trying to move other people to your side, is the Democratic ethic in my view, as a rhetorician.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
And you brought up the competitive debates, and there's a model for that too, as you and myself and Dr. Dalton and others who have collegiate debate experience. That's exactly what we do. It's every round, or for some formats of debate, it's a year-round topic to where it's more substantive, it's a lot more research-based. It is definitely prove your facts and prove your evidence and stuff there. So there are models even within our competitive sphere to show how that could work, even if it changes from round to round. I'm thinking about NPDA, but I kind of like the CETA model of really going deep into a topic for the full year. Yeah,
there's lots of models like this, and a lot of people don't like the intercollegiate debate because it's too sporty. It feels like you're on a sports team, and that's fine because it can be a metaphor for things. Like, you could think of a semester-long class in political science or something as an extended debate. You could teach it that way. Professors could teach it that way, or you could treat it that way. If you think about historiography is just hundreds and hundreds of years debate about what history is. And it's not even anywhere closer to being settled than it was under, Hegel or whoever, right? So, but I do think the intercollegiate debate model has a lot to say for it, even though directly it looks like part of the problem.
Right.
But I think you could base it off that, like the idea of like, I'm going to have an uninterrupted time to make a case, and if I fail to do that, I've failed to support my idea, and you should let me know that. That would be a good reason to maybe not support the idea. So I like that model quite a bit.
Hi, hello, my name is BK. I'm a history, philosophy, double major, political science minor. I want to thank you all so very much for the thoughtful conversation and points made today. I just want to first of all address, I was so excited to see that the Lincoln Douglas debates were being addressed, because it's such a point of interest for me, especially as introduced to me in Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, which gets a lot to the ideas you discussed about information, how it's sort of commodified, made into a product nowadays. And eloquence isn't really as stressed anymore. I think we could all go back to a more channel Socrates, I know that I know nothing. So we're always trying to learn and going back to just defining things. But I'm in Dr. Bose's presidential studies class, and we're currently going through the 70s, approaching the 80s. And I want to question something where you mentioned that there is a presidential debate where Mr. Carter was not present. And that hurt a lot of his image, his ratings, things like that. However, if we go to 2024, where President Trump was not present at earlier debates, why would you say, Dr. Llano, that didn't have a similar effect on Mr. Trump?
Right. No, that's a great question. The reason I think is because Trump chose not to go to primary debates. And I think primary debates are sort of, I don't have a lot of respect for them. I look at them, I try to write about them from time to time, but I think they're really just kind of like content and creation engines for the network. You know how many, most people, most people are not like us in this room. They won't sit down with like a beer and a bag of chips and watch the entire presidential debate. Like, it's like, yeah, it's game night in America.
What are you talking about? That's exactly what I do.
Not like us. They're not in this room. I think most Americans encounter with the presidential debate is maybe 2 minutes of journalistic selected clips of people being angry. And that's about all they see of it. And then they see it all day long, so they think the entire debate was like that because you have this sediment effect of seeing that same clip everywhere. Just like the broken windows effect. Like you see that same every 15 minutes that someone was stabbed on the subway in New York City, then you think that it's happened 100 times or whatever. There's studies on this. When it's only maybe once every month or something this happens. Which is still bad, but not as bad as we imagined it happened. So why didn't it affect? It affected Carter because I think there were less networks. That's a number one. There's no such thing as a DVR or a mobile phone or YouTube or anything like that. And so people are sort of watching this live, and it's on every broadcasted network is covering it, so you don't have an option to turn away. So there's a lot more exposure, and it wasn't a primary debate, it was like the actual presidential debates. And so there were only gonna be 3 of them. And him not attending one of those 3 made waves because journalists started to look at the background of that. They're like, who else refused to debate? Oh, Richard Nixon. Is Jimmy Carter like Richard Nixon? That's a bad comparison. Or LBJ. Is Jimmy Carter like LBJ? Well, not even close. Like in the other direction, right? Not even close, right? So the important thing to note about this is I don't think, if you went and researched it, I don't think you could make as a political scientist an argument that anyone would believe that debate affected Carter's reelection. It might have done a little bit, but I think it's the perception among people who work in the party and the campaigns that this was bad, and it would be better to just withdraw from debates totally, which is what Newton Minow didn't want. So when that happened, and then with the Mondale-Reagan debate, those debates almost didn't happen because the parties couldn't agree on 5 journalists to be on the panel. They all said they were biased one way or the other. So those debates almost didn't happen. So Newton Minow was like, forget this. I need to create a fake organization that I can control to make the debates happen the way I want. And that's what he did. So it's hard to make those arguments. The best evidence I've seen is that if you want debates to move people's decision-making, you have them extremely early. So the evidence I've seen is that you would want to have them in like July or something, even before the conventions. Those move people around, and that's why it might be a good idea to attend or not attend a primary debate. I think Trump's advisors ended up being correct, that attending the primary debates might have hurt his incredible commanding lead going into the convention. If he had to face Nikki Haley and some of his other detractors, it might have hurt his view among Republicans. We don't know, that's like counterfactual. But that was smart of him not to do that. And then to attend the regular debates, I think only helped him. But the evidence shows the closer to election day that you have a debate, the only thing it's going to do is galvanize people to turn out. They're not going to change their mind. Like they do experiments where they have a Likert scale and they'll say, which candidate do you like? And they might circle a 6 or a 7 for Donald Trump, maybe, or a 5 or 6 or something. And then they watch some of the presidential debate and then they're at a 9. So it does not change our mind. And you could even argue against Minow, it doesn't educate. It indoctrinates, it makes it a matter of ideology. But if you talk to Republican and Democratic people who work in campaigns, they're like, we don't care about changing people's minds. We want turnout. And we're gonna work on turnout. And if that zip code isn't in our database, we're not gonna do anything there. And that's how you get like people like George Santos, people like that. Because you don't have Oppo research. Because they're like, well, we're not gonna get a vote, why bother? And then he can go in there and just do crazy stuff.
Firstly, thank you for coming to our campus and presenting this really informative lecture. My question to you is, as someone who grew outside the US, I was taught to see the United States presidential debates as very structured. But in the Biden-Trump debates, when claims were made about election frauds without clear evidence, it felt more rhetorical rather than constitutional. And how do we then understand that kind of shift? Thank you.
So your question is, they're a lot more rhetorical, not constitutional? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you too well. Sorry. Can you say it again? I'm sorry.
Speak directly into the mic.
Yeah. My question to you was that as someone who grew outside the US, I was taught to see the United States presidential debates as very structured. But in the Biden-Trump debates, when claims like election fraud were made without clear evidence, it felt more rhetorical rather than constitutional. And how do we kind of see that shift then?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that, part of the fun of rhetoric is you can look at any text and do anything with it and just see what comes out. There's not really, I don't think in rhetoric we have a method. I know that's controversial. I don't know if you find, I don't think we have a method. I think we're much more of a cause trouble kind of field. Like, let's look at this in all these different ways, and they're all pretty good. And that's kind of what rhetorical criticism is. But I don't know. I think if you look at the presidential debates as a structural, logical argument, you're going to be very frustrated. And I think, like, when I go to Europe, European students are taught more formal logic than American students are. And they're taught, they're not really taught anything that, we're not really taught much of rhetoric anyway in the United States. But there's still a bit of a holdover from that because of the history of World War II and the GI Bill. So the core curriculum comes directly from President Truman signing the GI Bill, because you had wild differences in first-year students' ability to read, write, do math, all of that. So colleges got together, like, we should have a set number of classes people have to take, maybe like 20 or 30 hours of math, science, writing, speaking, all of that, because you had people who were educated in a one-room schoolhouse in Nebraska for the entirety of their school, and then you had East Coast prep school kids who'd been to 4 or 5, and it was just not fair. So that comes from that, but that's still, it's kind of trickled down a bit. But I don't know if we want, it's kind of an interesting question. Do we want the debates to be more logical and structured? Do we want them to be more rhetorical? I think you can always call them rhetorical and get a lot out of them, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at them some other way to get something out of them as well. Like, the fact checking is interesting, but it's bad if it's all we have. You can't have a restaurant if you have one item on it, on the menu, right? So you want to have some choices of how to look at it. I don't know if that really addresses your question, but I do think that being rhetorical is not a bad thing. It's just a different perspective we can take.
All right, good morning. I wanted to ask a question, kind of like very on topic, but kind of related more so to my major, because I am a neuroscience major. And for neuroscience, understanding biological and psychological reactions of people is paramount to my work. However, I think that this aspect of debate and even just conversation about politics is so overlooked, like how these psychological and biological influences can actually cause different reactions in people. So I guess my question is to ask how people, and especially young people, can understand the human interactions to not just facilitate good conversation, but to prevent combative conversation. And also, what can you say about the roles of degrees and courses like psychology, sociology, and neuroscience in politics, debate, and democracy itself?
What a great question. That's a crazy one. I know nothing about neuroscience and all of that, but there are people who study speech in that direction. There is a lot of interesting work coming out of joint work between philosophers and cognitive scientists on the question of what is an argument, which is a big question. If you think about that question, you might think, what a dumb question. Obviously, I know what it is. But then you start thinking about it, and you're like, actually, it's very difficult to nail down what an argument is, because you'll think of 3 arguments you've had probably even today that don't fit your definition, but you know they're arguments. If you're in a romantic relationship and your partner says, "Are you trying to argue with me?" There's a correct answer to this question. And the answer is no. I'm just concerned. I just want to have a discussion. I just want to make sure you know everything that's available to you. I just want to make sure you don't make a mistake. But if you say yes, then it's over. Conversation's over, and maybe more, right? So it's a slippery term, but the cognitive scientists and evolutionary psychology, which people, that's controversial in the neuroscience community, I understand, is evolutionary psych. They're saying that their research is pointing out that it is a mistake to think of our evolutionary inheritance as reason or logic or organizing things at all. And our evolutionary inheritance is to communicate, and to communicate argumentatively. And so that's the work of, if you're interested, Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber. One's a philosopher, one's a cognitive psychologist. I don't know which is which, but they're working with the neuroscience community to create all these books about how the fallacies, here's a big insight that you might find interesting is everyone familiar with the idea of confirmation bias? Yeah, if you're not, go read about it and you'll immediately agree with it. Good, okay, this is a good crowd. Why didn't you guys go to St. John's? I never get a laugh like that at St. John's, come on. It's a better school over here, you guys.
Exactly.
Yeah. They like my jokes. That's a big plus. They don't call it confirmation bias because in that work, because they feel like that makes it sound like an error. They say this is part of our evolutionary inheritance and it's a gift. And they call it the my side bias. And the my side bias is confirmation bias. But what it does is if you are communicating orally and there's an existential threat to your group, then you can very, very quickly run through a list of options in your head and make the argument you think will be most compelling to everyone there to do it very quickly. But then we've also kind of evolved this other response to it, which is to be able to immediately spot the flaw and argue against it very quickly. So that's why arguments go very quickly interpersonally. You'd be like, no, but what about that? And it's like, but then when you sit down to do a formal argument, you struggle because it's not on the same level of what we've evolved to do. So goes the argument. I think more research into this is necessary, but certainly not like, you'll know his name. I always forget this guy's name, but he wrote the book Letter to a Christian Nation. You know this author? He's kind of out of vogue now. I'll think of it probably tonight, and I'll email Dr. Robinson and tell him it's this, but I forget these people's names. Oh, Sam Harris. Sam Harris. Do you know Sam Harris? Yeah, Sam Harris feels like all of this wiggle room is to be overcome, and he thinks that we could modify the brain to eliminate lying through a medical procedure and things like this. Crazy kind of things like evil genius kind of stuff. But he's taken quite seriously, and he has a podcast that's taken quite seriously because people are very worried about the misuse of communication. But I think we could do more in the work of Sperber and Mercier to go in this direction, especially neuroscientists. I'm sure neuroscientists are doing some work on it. But this kind of direction, I think, is the way to go. It's like, let's appreciate our mistakes. There's a great Tibetan Zen master named Chogyam Trungpa. And he was asked once, what is your lineage? How did you get enlightenment? What's your Zen Buddhist lineage? Or your Buddhist lineage, not Zen, he's Tibetan. But he said, my lineage is a bunch of missteps and mistakes. So we should own our mistakes, I think, and celebrate them because they're part of something that happened to us millions of years ago that we're using still today. So hopefully that's a good answer. Huh? Science, oof.
There's a question back there for our first year students. They read the DeSoya logo.
Oh, DeSoya logo, yeah.
Yeah, last semester from one of our other rhetoric professors. So it connects thinking about those arguments and ethos, pathos, and logos, and yeah.
Yeah, DeSoya logo is like the first sort of like diversity and inclusion kind of text that I know about.
There's a question in the back.
Yeah.
Oh, I think there's one more here.
Good morning. Thank you for your lecture and for coming to our campus. I just wanted to go back to your lecture. So you talked about going back to Lincoln-Douglas debates where it's just candidates doing debates themselves, no moderators, and talking for hours. My question is, do you think modern audiences would accept that given today's shorter attention span? And if not, is there a way to keep the depth but make it work for modern audiences?
No, and also no. No, I'm just kidding. I have more to say about that. Yeah, I do think that, I don't know about this attention span argument. I believed it for a long time. But if you look at some of the data that cuts against it, like lots of you young people are reading whole books again. Lots of young people are watching documentaries again. We do tend to interact with young people in public places where you're on your phone on TikTok, and maybe we're overestimating attention span kind of stuff. But there's new work on attention coming out pretty soon. My friend has a book at MIT that is called Attention Literacy. It's coming out pretty soon. And it's about the idea that we should think of attention as kind of how we learned how to read. We should learn how to pay attention in the same way we learned how to read, which I think is such a cool argument and so obvious that I wish I'd thought of it, you know? But I think the attention span issue is only a concern if you think of people as in linear and non-asymmetric formats of media consumption, which is patently false. We're not in the broadcast era anymore. If you miss a show, you can always find it. You know, so you can always watch. I don't know if you guys do this, but you watch part of something and stop and then pick it up later. Like the YouTube algorithm seems to indicate that this is how people do. If you put like a 3-hour video, people will stop and then come back to it at a different timestamp over a period of a month. So I think the attention span argument is also an argument you would like if you ran a media company that was based on advertising. because that's where that's really coming from, is the motive is like the money. Like no one's going to watch this enough to make it worth, $500,000 for a 30-second ad for Applebee's or whatever. So we're not going to air it. But I think and there's so much digital video and stuff, you could do a lot of things. So I think that would be a cool way to do it, be for the candidates to say, on our official YouTube channel, we'll be posting videos and going back and forth to each other. And why would it have to be live? The president doesn't have to make decisions instantly or respond instantly. They can take their time to come up with a statement or call their allies and then come up with what to say to a foreign leader. Why not mirror that in the debate? Wouldn't that be interesting if whoever gets the Democratic nomination is like, I'm going to make some arguments about the Trump administration. They can respond in a video in the comments, and then we could just watch that. I think that would be pretty cool. So the model has to meet modern media. The presidential debate model is, another problem with it is it's a broadcast media holdover. It's like a hangover from the time when there were 3 or 4 channels and no VCRs and no DVRs. And you had to watch it live or watch it in the morning news clips, but you couldn't go and watch it again. So, I think the attention span thing is maybe a little bit overblown, or at least it needs to be reconfigured for the TikTok world and the immediate algorithm feedback world, I would say. But I do think the candidates should talk to each other and set the debate up without anybody else, and then CNN can come cover it. And I think that would be great, because then they wouldn't have a hand in it.
Thank you, Dr. Llano, for this very instructive talk. Kind of not maybe in defense of the commission, it seems like there's a tension between candidates wanting control and the public and voters wanting to, get them to be impromptu, to speak up. It seems to me that the commission did a nice job. Hofstra hosted 3 debates, 2008, 2012, 2016, and they were great educational opportunities, not just for our campus, but for the community. And I'm wondering if there's a way to build that in again. Do you see, it seems as though, is there a way to build infrastructure to ensure debates, maybe short of a constitutional amendment? Because it seems as though if the commission is gone and we just leave it up to media and groups, it will be maybe too decentralized. So I'm just curious for your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, I think looking forward, my suspicion is that the commission will continue to exist, but they'll simply become an educational organization that will just kind of scramble for the crumbs that the big networks leave around. They'll make materials for teachers and things like that, and materials for instructors. I think that's probably their future. I don't think they can. I don't think in the next cycle they can go head to head with the big networks. But I do think they could have a good fight on their hands if Fox decided to host a debate, because Fox is a very polarizing kind of organization. And I think the commission could make arguments there. But I'm glad you had a good experience with them. I talked to Brian Lamb, and he was not having it. He did not like those people. But he, in his traditional Brian Lamb kind of way, I was talking to him on a Zoom, and I was like, well, they're very nice people, but they probably shouldn't be in charge of something so important. And he goes, nice people, yeah. So, I think that the commission needs to really do some soul searching. I appreciate what they try to do, and if you watch the commission debate on anything other than C-SPAN, you don't see half of what they do, where they're coming out and they're talking to the crowd and they're talking about what's set up, and they have materials on their website that are pretty good for teachers and things like that. And that was kind of Newton Minow's dream, was voter education. But how about that, and all that's fine, but what if we could form an organization that went beyond voter education and went to rhetorical education, democratic education? What are our responsibilities? Why are these the only people debating? Why aren't we debating all the time? And if we wanted to have that time, why aren't we compensated for it? Why do we have to go to work all the time? All these questions would come up if we got some enjoyment from that. But you're right. The commission does have a silver lining to it, and we've had a lot of great debate moments. They're a little bit overblown if you look at the political science data. I don't think a debate has flipped an election ever. We'll have to look at the Biden-Trump. That's the one everyone's thinking of, is that everyone immediately, with all of their medical school experience sitting at home, immediately knew that Joe Biden had Alzheimer's disease from all of their deep experience of watching television news. I don't get that. But it's like a Goldwater rule moment for me, that the media just forgot about the Goldwater rule. The commission could come in and do things like that and say, let's be careful about how we evaluate debates, and let's think about these debates as the little teeny tiny peak of something we should be doing all the time. And let's think of debates as rhetorical education, not just voter education, but education in how to speak to each other about the political, which really isn't fact-based. Facts play a part, but when we're doing, like Aristotle said, like when we're talking about the deliberative, we're talking about the future, and nobody can really know that. All we can do is kind of say, well, from the past, we know these people have behaved these ways, and so we should have a policy in this way towards Sparta or whoever. And so when you're dealing with the future, the facts aren't all that helpful in determining who's better at making those kind of judgments for unseen or what Joe Biden called novel challenges and extremely novel challenges in the Oval Office. So. Yeah, I don't know if it answers it, but I'm glad you had a good experience. I don't think too highly of these people. If you read my book,
I think part of what made the experiences here at Hofstra so fruitful and educational was the programming that the professors did surrounding it. Yeah. To where there was a lot of work that went into, and Dr. Bose was certainly a huge part of that, of making sure that there was educational things that were open to the community. Dr. Wu was also a part of that, Dr. Dalton. Several of us were creating programming that was open to our students, open to the public, in the lead up to and in the aftermath of, to make sure that there was education. So thank your professors for keeping everything together. But also, please join me in first thanking Dr. Wu and co-moderating this with me.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you to Dr. Bose, to the Cultural Center, but also thank you, Dr. Llano, for joining us today.
It was my pleasure.